Hey everybody, I'm Bob Bakert with Jazz Guitar today, and we're talking with trumpeter, educator, podcaster, author, all-around cool guy, Dr. Gordon Vernick from Georgia State University. So you were saying something about trying to teach people to trumpet over Zoom.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful to be here, Bob. It's an honor to talk to you on this platform. Um, so Zoom and Skype don't work well for brass instruments because unless a student is using a very high quality microphone with all kinds of things to limit the sound of the horn into a microphone, it can be just an absolute disaster. I have one student, his father owns a recording studio, so his sound is just perfect. But for most other people, it's a nightmare. And I'm saying, please play that again. And then when they get up close to the microphone, it completely distorts because they're using like a $29. This is how old I am. Radio Shack microphone. Radio Shack's been out of business for 15 years, but you know what I mean. So,
I do.
during COVID, we had no choice. Um, and in retrospect, I probably could have done some of those lessons, if I'd been, in a large room. But that was just what we had to put up with for over a year. But I really couldn't work on sound because that's the
Right.
most important thing with any instrument, whether you're a guitarist or trumpet player or a vocalist, is sound. Everything is secondary to sound. So if I can't hear your sound, it makes it really difficult to be an effective teacher.
Well, in the world of guitar, they refer to it as tone. Does he have tone or not have tone?
Well,
But
you have a thing here. I wish I had one of those.
yeah.
A pot is, I could turn it up and down and just press buttons because my lips aren't working properly. My sound is like really not that well focused.
well, let me tell you why I wanted to talk to you today. I got a couple of things that I wanted to get into. Uh, First of all, let me just say this. I wanted to thank you for something on, I think no one's asked me to do this, but on behalf of the city of Atlanta, I know for a fact that you are by far the most influential person in jazz in Atlanta ever. You've taught so many people and you've led jam sessions the whole time. But even farther beyond that is the people you have taught, the people that came through your program are now the educators in other universities, other schools, other colleges. So the Gordon Vernick thing, your stamp is all over the Atlanta jazz scene, and it's also obviously it goes further than that because all the guys that study with you, that play in bands, that tour all over the world, and all that. So, without a doubt, your presence, your feeling, your energy, your body of work is phenomenal with what you've meant to the world of jazz. And I personally want to thank you, but I think the city of Atlanta owes you a thank you for everything that you've done.
That's very kind of you, Bob. I think of myself not so much as a teacher, but more of a mentor, but also as kind of a farmer. And what a farmer does is you start with really high quality seeds, good fertilizer, water, sun, and all these things, and you grow a crop. And for me here at Georgia State, for someone who runs a program like this, our students are our crop, and we try to help them to grow, and so they can mature into self-sufficient quality musicians who are on a journey to find their own voice. And we got to pick out the weeds, and not every crop is going to be great. Sometimes we have great years, sometimes we have a little bit of a drought. But over 30 plus years at Georgia State University, we've had more a very fruitful harvest than years of drought. And a legacy for a teacher really are the students that you turn out. I'm not responsible for everyone's success, but I provide an environment, and I hire really good teachers that I trust, that I know will help mentor students in the right direction. And you're very true. What you said was very true. I have a lot of students, former students out there that have gone through our program maybe the whole program, maybe they were in our middle school program, maybe they came out of our high school program, decided to go to New York. But I've had a chance to intersect with some amazing talent, and it really is an important thing. And it's, when I look back on the body of the work of the things that we have accomplished here, I don't do everything by myself. I have to surround myself with really, really good people, whether it's Dave Frackenpole, Kevin Bales, Robert Boone, is our drum set instructor, David Sanchez. These are people that are great teachers and mentors, and I just kind of turn them loose. And when it's time to make a system adjustment, I step in, or we just talk about a specific student, what would best serve their needs, or maybe they're not a good fit for what we're trying to achieve. And that's always a difficult thing. If a student comes in, they have an idea of what a jazz guitarist or jazz trumpet player is, and it really doesn't fit our agenda, then maybe we're not a good fit for that particular student. But we try to accommodate all of them, and I appreciate what you said. And as I look back on a pretty long career, and I got a lot of good years ahead of me,
Yes, you do.
to keep doing this, it really is. It's sometimes I have to, kind of just pinch myself and say, did I really work with that student? Or I had a student, a very good guitarist, Jeremy Wilms, who was in our program in 94 and 95. And that goes back, 25 years. And he was in New York for many years, and he's relocated to Atlanta. His wife is a scientist, or she's doing something. She has a very good job, and they decided that New York was getting too expensive and whatever, and they relocated down here. And he sounds like $1,000,000. And I was somebody said, "Who's that guitarist?" I said, "Well, he was a class of 95." And I started thinking, God, that's a long time ago. And he's got kids now, and they're grown up. So that's, what I always get kind of weirded out when when I see a student who's married and they have their kids, but when I see grandchildren, I go, oh my God, I've been here that long.
Well, well, if it makes you feel any better, when I was down there in 2013, 14, and 15, um, I was twice as old. Wait a minute, I was twice as old as a lot of my teachers and 3 times as old as any of my other fellow students.
Yeah, the students. Yeah, it's really kind of a funny thing. And, we have a wonderful program called GSU 62, that if
Uh,
you're over 62 and you can if you are accepted into the university, you can pretty much take any classes that you like, and it doesn't cost you anything. It's a wonderful program. So
that's
we have
great.
a lot of adult students who decide that they want to come back and sharpen up their skills, or they just enter a program, a bachelor's or a master's program. So it's a really cool program. So we have people that come back with, incredible life skills and business acumen, who have also a lot to offer our young students, our traditional students, the kids right out of high school.
Well, the interesting thing, I'm gonna blow a little more smoke up your skirt here. If you read your PR, if you will, the places you've been, the people you've played with, the things that you've done in terms of being a clinician and a teacher, master classes, literally all over the world. I love the one, the conservatory at Bordeaux. I think that's I think
That
that
was
might
that was fantastic. And
I don't
the wine was just terrific.
how do you do better than that? I look at all these other prestigious schools, and I'm going, well, that's nice, but I think the one I want to be at is the conservatory in Bordeaux.
And when I was an undergraduate in college, I was a French major, and I was doing music as a kind of a secondary a major, as a minor. And after a semester of language study, I decided I didn't want to be a French major, because I wanted to learn how to speak to improve my conversational French. And what they were doing, they were teaching me how to read, 18th century Moliere books, and I was not interested in that. So I kind of left that. So when I did go to Bordeaux, and with my broken French, what I can remember, going to a coffee shop and having a real croissant, and then sitting out and having a cup of coffee, and I thought, oh my God, I should be paying these people for this experience.
I've been to France a couple of times, and I absolutely understand where you're coming from with that.
But the traveling that I do all over the world, music and this is such a cliche, it is a language in itself. And I've been to the Far East, to Europe, South America, all over Asia, and but music speaks. So if I'm somewhere, I remember being in where I was in Bangkok and going to a jazz club, and there was a group playing there, and they were quite good. And a friend of mine said he knew someone, and they made an introduction. I said, "Dolphin dance, uh, C." And they went like this, and we played it, and it was fantastic. No words were spoken. So um, this music, all music is a language, but jazz music, especially because it's so spontaneous, and you have to have such a deep knowledge of chords and scales and all these other things. Not only just knowing melodies, not that I'm playing that part down, but it going all over the world and doing this is so easy. And playing a trumpet is, like my father was a professional musician in New York City, and he was my first mentor for better or for worse. But he said, either you can play the instrument or you can't. And he was a bassist, and it always starts with, good fundamentals. Can you play the instrument? Then you figure out what language you want to play, whether it's jazz, you want to be an orchestral player, you want to play modern avant-garde. They're all different. Like it's like cuisine. You start with really good basic foodstuffs, high quality fish, meat, vegetables, and then you decide, well, I'm going to do Asian, I'm going to do Middle Eastern, and then you add the spices. And that's kind of how music is. You start with really good fundamentals. Can you play your instrument? And then that's recognized around the world. So it's so easy, and it's so much fun for me. And I can learn a few words in a language and speak a little bit of a broken language. But most people don't even not even interested. I play the trumpet and say, this is what it sounds like, and that's a language in itself.
I mean, I'm gonna kind of echo what you're saying here. I mean, I've interviewed guys from Australia, people in Beijing, people in Norway, people in Italy, people in France, people in South America. I mean, literally all over the world. We've been doing this for 5 years, and the commonality is the language, is the music, and sometimes sometimes speaking to these people is a little bit broken, but the commonality. So I'm hearing what you're saying, and I've actually lived that with these people. Absolutely. So another nice thing, and again, we still haven't gotten where I want to get to with the thing I was going to ask you. But the other thing that I want people to know about you specifically is that you're still, a lot of educators don't play or much. Many of them do. I'm not going to sell people short. There's a lot of guys that still are out there very active and growing. But back in the day when I was taking classes, I would be in the studio trying to figure out what the hell they wanted me to know, and I would hear you playing in your office. I hear you working on your chops in your office a lot. I mean, not just like once or twice. I mean, you practiced all the time on your own.
It's the nice thing about music versus music is a muscle memory skill, just like
Right.
baseball, football, or basketball. But the thing about music is that even as your body is aging, you can still get better at what it is you're trying to accomplish. You can still reach your goals. Where as you get older, certain things break down. You can't quite throw a baseball or football or swing a golf club the way you did 30 years ago. But you can certainly do more things on your instrument, and it just comes to consistent practicing. And I've been a lifelong practicer, and at one point in my life, I really wanted to just to play the trumpet for a living. And my father was a musician in New York City, and so back in the late 60s, early 70s, he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a musician. And he looked at me and he said, you're not going to be able to do what I did do for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought he was saying that I wasn't a very good trumpet player. And I was a pretty good trumpet player. I wasn't a great trumpet player, but I played well. And I was, made all state, all what are those things is my high school kids try out for. But what he was saying was the business
Right.
of music was changing.
Right.
The kind of music that he played growing up, in the 30s and 40s and 50s was more or less jazz based kind of music, Sinatra, Basie, that kind of stuff. Of course, rock and roll began to um, move in and replace that kind of music. And today, of course, jazz has a very, very small part of the niche, but he could see the writing on the wall. And he said, you might want to, think about maybe music education, but you can always play your trumpet. And the thing that people used to say back then is say, you can always work your way through college. And and he was kind of right. I
Right.
did play in bands and I did play in the Catskills for parts of seasons when I was able to get out of school. But the business is changing. But I've always maintained a professional attitude about my art form, the way I play the instrument. So another thing about playing the trumpet is that, if you make a mistake, everyone can hear it. It's such a directional instrument. I remember when I was a kid, my dad used to take me down to the Union Hall. Actually, it was like a clearinghouse for jobs for musicians in New York City, and it used to take place every Wednesday at a place called the Roseland Ballroom, not the one from the 20s, a different one. And there would be hundreds, if not close to thousands of musicians in these little cliques everywhere. And you had the guys did jazz recordings, studio people, the guys were playing ethnic music, the orchestral musicians, and they would go from group to group with a little date book and get their dates for the week or the month, whatever it was. And I remember I met a very famous trumpet player. I didn't understand his fame until many years later. And he said, "Oh, you play the trumpet?" My father introduced me, and he says, "Well, it's a good instrument, but it's something you got to be careful because," he said, if you make a mistake, a big mistake," he said, "everybody know."
That's
And
for
that's
sure.
the thing I really didn't need to hear as a 12-year-old learning how to play the trumpet, because you're just trying to fit in somewhere and not make mistakes. And then so you're like, right, if I make one mistake, everyone's going to know. It's like being under a microscope. So,
It is.
but that work ethic has stayed with me to the point now where I'm here at my office and there's no one around here, but I can go into a large rehearsal room, get my horn out, and I can practice my craft. I play every Wednesday and I play other engagements. I don't play as many engagements as I used to, but that's okay because um, I don't really want to. I want to be able to pick and choose the
Sure.
kinds of engagements where the music is the central focus, because unfortunately a lot of music, unless you go to hear the symphony, especially popular music, is more or less kind of a background, been relegated to a kind of a background music. We're having a party, you want some nice music. Oh, you want background music. Oh,
I
I didn't
call
spend
I
my
call
life trying to learn how to play the trumpet so I can play background music while you're having cocktails.
I call it a wallpaper gig.
Yeah, but if the money's right, it's like, yeah, I'm there. But on the other hand, what I've been able to do with those kinds of requests is with my younger students, I know who I can count on, who I know are my students who are responsible enough, and I have confidence that if I say there's an event, they want a quartet and they're going to pay X amount of dollars, and here's the information, go play the job.
Right.
And I said, I don't want to get any phone calls from the client, because if I do, that means that something went
Right.
wrong,
Right.
or it was so good they had to tell me something. And then what I do is I'm also training them to learn the professional aspects of the music business. So now I have kids out there that are playing. I don't have, that are playing. They're booking their own things. They're playing at a little jazz thing here, or a little coffee shop here, or a brewer. Now the big thing is like Sunday and Saturday afternoon breweries are having live music, and all these kids are all students of mine, and they have this they have a whole group of musicians that they're hiring, and I'm looking at them, and every once in a while one of the kids will call me to see if I can sub for them. It's like, yeah, sometimes I'll do it just for fun, just to get out of the house. Um,
Well, let me tell you this. You're talking about the business of music and not being able to, your father telling you that you're not gonna be able to make a living. So let me see, in the year 2000, let me see, what year the hell was that? 1970, 71. I had just left a trio that I was playing in, and I started playing in clubs and where anybody would hire me basically. And the number that I would get paid a night I started out at about $75 a night, 5 nights a week. And then that moved to about $100 a night, 5 nights a week. And I did that for 15 years. So until I was in my mid 30s, early 30s actually. And if you did a one-off, you would get between usually $250 to $400 to do a one-off. I mean, that was back. This was in 1970 to 70, 3 or 4. Early. That money, for inflation is almost 100 grand a year today. And I didn't do anything else but play. And most of the guys that I knew that were like me, that were playing gigs, they didn't do anything else but play. And that's how we made our living. I bought a house, had cars, and did the whole 9 yards. I don't know anybody that's a gigging musician. I'm not talking about like a guys that are doing tours and the big act. I mean, people are making that same kind of that exact, not the inflated number, but they're making
the same amount,
the same actual number today. I mean, I know guys that are doing gigs for $50, $60, $70. I mean,
that's a real problem.
Yeah.
Because you have to, it comes down to a value system. People don't value music as much today as they did in previous generations, especially kind of music we play, because of something called iTunes and Spotify and Napster,
Right.
where the music is you don't place a value on something if you don't pay for it, if it's free. That's
Mhm.
why you can turn the faucet on and walk away and come back and worry about it. I'm still my parents were Depression era people where you never turn the faucet on and walk in the other room, because you'd get, somebody would say something to you, and they were always checking the thermostat. So because you had to pay for things, you put a value on it. If it's free, there's no value system to it.
Right.
And I'm guilty of the same things. I'll be in the car and I'm thinking about preparing a lecture, and I need to listen to a specific Miles Davis recording. Be at a red light, and I'll say that Miles Davis, whatever it is, and the recording just pops up. I didn't pay for it. I mean, I'm paying my phone bill, so indirectly someone's making money, but the artist is not
Yeah.
making any money.
No.
So the incentive to play and record has been changed, and the playing field, in my humble opinion, has been decimated because of the lack of value of a product that you're trying to sell, and you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears in it, and it's almost valueless in terms of a fiscal approach. But spiritually and musically, it's luckily, you don't choose to be a musician. Music chooses you. So
Mhm.
I look at all these young musicians, whether it's on YouTube or Instagram or whatever platform, and I see unbelievable talent, young people, men and women. It's no longer, the United States no longer has a monopoly. And there's a young woman, I think she's in her early 20s. Her name is Kelly Hanna. She plays the trumpet, and she's just phenomenal. And I subscribe to her. I think it's Instagram or Facebook. I don't know what it is. I still don't know how it works, but I found all these. Luckily, there's still people doing it, and it is very difficult to make a living doing this. Most of the top musicians that I know all have some kind of relationship with an educational institution, whether they're
Yep.
teaching part-time or they're artists in residence or they're full-time instructors. Most people have some kind of relationship with, whether it's a public school, private school, conservatory, some kind of outreach program. People are writing grants. There's no shortage of great musicians. What is a shortage of are venues that place monetary value on what an artist has to offer, and it's probably the same thing in all the performing arts.
Yeah.
It's a real issue. So Johnny comes to me, and I'm just using a generic term, and he
Right.
wants to be a jazz saxophone player, and I sit down with him and his parents, and they'll say, what is Johnny going to do with this degree? And I'll say, it makes a great birdcage liner. I don't say that anymore, but I remember saying that once. And it's true. It's just a piece of paper. It's what you do on the way to receiving that piece of paper that will either ensure your success or
Right.
lack of success. And the reason people go to college, and I learned this a long time ago. And I always ask students, why do you go to college? They say, to learn how to play the trumpet. You don't have to go to college to learn how to play the trumpet. Dizzy Gillespie didn't go to college. Harry Glantz didn't, the great trumpet player in New York, Phil, didn't go to college. He took lessons, and when time was right, the teacher said, well, go audition for the symphony.
Right.
So you can learn all these things on your own, but what you do learn in college is organization and responsibility.
Right.
And that's, for me, that's a key. And I maintain that. So you talk about, you heard me practicing, is because I'm organized. I have to do this. I know I have a weakness here. And I guess an important part of being a good musician is to recognize what your strengths are, but more important, recognize what your weaknesses are, and always practice towards your weakness. So I'm working on something that I don't do very well. And I'm sitting in my office, and I know it doesn't sound good. I'm cracking and fracking. And the kids are walking by and say, God, Dr. Vernick's having a hard day. It's because I'm working on exactly what I should work on.
Right.
And I try to leave my ego at the door, because every time you're in a practice room, you always want to sound really good because you don't know who's going to be walking by. I sound terrible, so that when it comes time to go onto the bandstand, or if I'm doing a performance or a workshop, that my craft I've been working on, whatever it is, I can execute it to a fairly high degree.
Right. I absolutely hear you on that, and that's well articulated. So, okay, I think you're kind of getting into something I want to talk to you about. People love lists. We know on the podcast and the interviews and all that, they love lists. So I'm going to ask you a top 5 kind of thing, and I'd actually like to ask you 2 of them, but I'm going to start with this one. So, you've probably been asked this question a million times by incoming freshmen, but top 5 things that you want these kids to know when they come through your program, when they leave the program, they've learned these things from you and your guys and women, by the way. So what would you say that is?
That's a really that's a very good question. There's so many things. Top 5, I would say, is understand the jazz language. It's a language, and you can't learn any language out of a book. You learn the language by hearing it and repeating it. So I want to make sure that when my students leave here, they have a really good grasp of how the language works. They can repeat it by rote, as opposed by looking at the notes on the page and just trying to figure out, I'm supposed to accentuate this note or that note. So jazz phrasing, they have to have a good concept of an understanding of jazz theory. For jazz musicians, for all musicians, theory is really important. But for a jazz musician, because we are improvising, if your knowledge of theory is weak, it really affects what you can play. Now there have been instances of great improvisers who really didn't know what they were doing, but they had such an innate sense of melody and melodic comprehension. They just played. So they have to understand the language. They have to have a sense of theory. They have to be able to know the repertoire. There are young musicians that get out of college that know 3 songs. So you have to have repertoire. You have to have knowledge of theory. You have to know something about history. Not only just a music history, but the history of the world, the history of this country, because that really feeds into the development of jazz as primarily as a totally African-American art form. It's been influenced by other musics around the world, but you have to understand the history. If you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going. So that's 4 things. And then you have to be able to articulate what it is you're doing. So that's the teaching part. So when students leave here, if they can do those, have a good grasp of those 4 things: history of the music, history of how the music fits into the fabric of society, how the history of jazz music fits into the fabric of American society, how it's affected the world is really important, understanding of music theory and how it affects what we do as musicians, repertoire, knowing some songs, and of course, just the history of the music, knowing recordings. You should have, if someone says, I name me 10 important Miles Davis tracks or whatever it is, you need to have that. And the kids that are most successful, they know that. And if I ask someone who's a sophomore or junior, who's your favorite, jazz guitarist, or incoming student, who's your favorite jazz guitarist, and they mumble, and they just kind of fumble around and they'll mention something. I'll just say, this is not a serious student.
Right.
By the time a student comes here as a freshman and they're pretty serious about their music, they'll say Pat Martino, Pat Metheny of West Montgomery. Maybe if they study the old stuff, it could be Django Reinhardt, it could be Oscar Moore, or Joe Bonamassa. I don't care. But if a student knows that, then I say they probably can figure out the other four things.
Right.
And then, and of course, and the most important thing is that they're good human beings, because nobody wants to be around someone who is unpleasant, no matter how well they play. I always ask, when I bring in the most famous musicians in the world to do master class, I always ask them a few questions, and one of is what's the most important bit of advice you can give a young musician who wants to go to New York? And they usually say something on the effect of humility, know your limitations, and be nice.
Yeah. That's my two commandments of how to succeed in business. You've just said them. Basically, it's the same thing. It's solve problems and try not to be an asshole. I mean,
Yeah, and I had a years ago, a great trombonist. His name escapes me. Played on a lot of the old CTI recordings, and he did a master class for us. And he said it in a kind of a little more of a gruff way, but and all the students were like, because generally in the South, people here are very, very courteous, and they wouldn't say that. And he was a real kind of gruff New Yorker, and he said, "Don't be a you know what.
yeah.
Nobody wants it. Nobody. We got enough of them around. We don't need another one." So
Well, I love it. Before we go, I love your quote. I'm a mentor and a tormentor, something of that.
yeah, you have to do both, and it's a really good teacher can zero in on a problem immediately, and a really good teacher zeroes in on a problem but also has five solutions.
Right.
So that's you just can't say that's wrong or that wasn't good. You have to offer five solutions, and then of
Right.
course say, then go listen to this, do practice this, do this and this, and next week come back and see me. And if a student does that, I know they're on the way. If they haven't done it, then I know they're not very serious about it.
Right.
So the tormenting part is just constantly reminding them that old school thing. And then of course the mentoring is kind of the watering of the flower, and
Right.
then but you also have to pick out the weeds and pick off the dead leaves. So it's both of those things, as you just said.
I'm laughing to myself because I recently did a reenactment of J.K. Simmons' role of Terrence Howard from Whiplash, and I was that guy. Speaking of tormentors, did you see that movie?
Yes, I did.
What did you think of it?
Well, it I had a lot of people come up to me as they asked me about that, because they said sometimes I'm like that in rehearsal. I said, first of all, I never raised a hand to a student, but I've been very, very honest with a student that should have been playing better, and I have lost my temper. But I didn't think that was. I think it was a little off the over the top, and it didn't really help the cause of jazz education and music education, because most
Right.
people just came away from that thinking that this guy was crazy. But he did have high standards, and he was trying to get the best out of his students. But I don't particularly agree with the way that old school kind of
Yeah.
authoritarian tormenting a
Yeah.
student. So there were some great things about it. Other things I thought, oh my God, this might have set us back a couple of years.
Yeah.
There've been a lot of movies about music and jazz music, and I really haven't seen one that I really, really liked. Although there was one that came out, it was about Chet Baker's life, but just a very, very short period in his life in the
Right.
60s when he had his teeth knocked out. I thought that was really well done, and it really lent a lot of insight into him as a human being and as a musician. I thought that was quite good. But Whiplash was that was rough, and I don't think it did us any favors.
No, I mean, I had to be that guy. I mean, I was, because I've been an actor now for the last 3 or 4 years. I had to be that guy, and I had to throw the chair and the whole 9 yards. It was really interesting. Anyway, well, I will tell you that uh, what I said early when we first started, that the city of Atlanta owes you um, a lot of thanks, and the world of jazz owes you a lot of thanks for all that you've done. I mean that sincerely. You know, uh, it dawned on me, I don't know how many years ago. I've been saying this for a long time, by the way. It probably never gets to you, but it dawned on me. I said, "Gee, everybody in this frickin' town is either studied with Gordon or has studied with somebody who studied with Gordon." I mean, it's like almost everybody. And I said, it's like, if you will, like Eric Clapton. I mean, bottom line is that pentatonic blues scale that he plays, that every rock and roll player for the last 40 years has played, is a derivative of what he's done. And so, but you've been amazing, and you're not done. You're still playing. I mean, not done at all. You're still playing
Well,
every Wednesday night. You got your jazz jam at the Red Light Cafe. People from out of town, if you come to Atlanta, go to the Red Light on Wednesday night. You'll be welcomed in. Bring your instrument, or just come and hang. It's a great venue, great musicians. You got Kevin Bales still playing with you a lot, I'm sure.
yes, yeah. Kevin is was supposed to play, but he has to be in South Carolina. So Randy Hexter is playing tomorrow. But
Love
I get
Randy.
really great musicians. Tyrone Jackson plays. Sometimes Louis Haribo, Kevin, and some really great guitar players come through. And the thing
Sure.
about a jam session, just because you go doesn't mean you should play. Sometimes it's a great place to
Just
learn repertoire. I have friends that come in they're close to my age, and they'll write down the name of every tune that we play. They'll
Yeah.
say, "What's that song you play there?" And then they'll go home and learn. I do the same thing. So a lot of people come just to listen and to figure out what we're playing, and then when they feel that the time is right, especially with younger performers, um, then I always quiz them. If it's a singer coming in and they'll say, "We want to sing such and such a song." I say, "Do you know what key?" And they say no. I say, "Well, then you need to sit down because you're not ready to get them on the bandstand," and try to figure out, because it's not my job to tell you or have a pianist, play
Yeah.
this and see, here's the starting note. Then I know it's going to be a long session.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, your jam sessions where the big boys come to play. I mean, for the most part. I mean, it's serious players. It's not a place to go as a beginner and
No,
find.
no, it's not. But we do have some incredibly talented, like, high school age kids that
Oh
come in.
yeah.
Just, I was like, oh my God, how'd you learn that? And it's because they started at a very early age with harmony, language,
Yeah.
repertoire, all these things, history, and I can tell that they're already students of all these things. And they come in and they're not fully formed, but they're really close to it.
And
And
you
that's
see
what I
that,
love to see.
you see that talent, and you nurture it, you encourage, you do a great job, Gordon. You do a great job. I'm a big fan, if you haven't figured that
Well,
out.
thank
Big,
you, Bob.
big fan of what
I
you do.
appreciate that.
So I think I'm done, unless there's something that you want to bring up about either your program, or I know that, what, speaking of books, you wrote the Jazz History Overview, which is really a textbook.
Yes, we use that in our history classes. We
Yeah,
went from, teaching, 20 to 25 students a year in our jazz origins class to over 600 students a
right.
year, mostly in online classes. And that's
Sure.
really, it's exploded. So we had to come up with a textbook that was, Jeff Hayden and I came up with that. And we didn't want too much information, because too much information is almost as bad as bad information, because
Right,
then you don't know how to separate what it is you need to know from all the peripheral stuff, which is also important, especially for someone who's not a musician. You can't be throwing them names and concepts.
right.
Here's the basic stuff. So we just had to keep, distill it down to some really basic concepts, and that's done really well. I've done podcasts. I had a radio show for many years, and
2011 to 2016, I think.
yeah, well, actually, we started about 2009
Or
ish.
2008, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we started with
2009.
Jazz Insights, and
Yeah,
those podcasts are still floating around on iTunes. And at some point, when the radio station closed down, my incentive for creating a radio show every week kind of went away with it. But I have created videos for our online classes. It's an anecdote I'll leave you with. So I created, 20 of these videos, from the music of Louis Armstrong all the way up to, free jazz and fusion and Miles Davis and Pat Metheny and other things. And so I'm on the video talking. I have a nice green screen behind me, and we have pictures and we play clips. And we don't use videos, but we use audio clips. And I say, at this point, we're going to stop. I want to play Miles Davis's recording of such and such from this second to this second. And so this is what the kids see, because when you're in an online class, you never see the professor. So I'm walking
Right.
across campus and someone will say, "Hey, Dr. Vernick, I'm in your class." And I'm looking like, what class is that? It's just the jazz class. I said, "I'm not teaching that." And then I realized that I'm the face of the class, because they don't see the
Right.
professor. They see me. So I say, "Thank you very much."
Oh yeah,
The
thank
first
you.
time that happened,
I hope you're enjoying it.
that's funny. So I'm the face of it because I created the videos.
Sure. Well, if you, my point to everybody out there watching and listening to this is that if you want to, you want to do the deep dive, jazz history overview is available. I will say it's not cheap.
No, that
it's a
you can buy
textbook.
used copies on Amazon, as
Yeah.
everyone does. Now most kids are doing ebooks.
Yep.
Which is very convenient. I if you can see the books
Yeah.
here, this is my downstairs office. I have another office that has hundreds of books, and
Right.
I just collect books on anything that interests me, especially about music and history.
Sure.
I'm not necessarily related. I'm really a big fan of world and American history. I want to know why we are where we are, and if you peel back the layers and go, now I understand. The history is like an onion,
You
and
know,
you keep peeling back layers.
it's funny that you say that, because for the last 15 years or so, that's what I've been doing. Studied the five great religions. Why do I got started with why do people around the world hate us so much? What did we do? And this is what years ago I started, diving into that. So I mean, this is not the forum for that, but I can relate to what you're saying. So I spent a lot of time learning all the history and all the things that go on. At least I shouldn't say learning; I should say diving into it and deeply, and that it
Yeah,
fascinates me.
I understand completely, because I have books up here. They're all about history, American history,
Right,
and I'm very one of the things. I guess my one of my strongest suit is curiosity.
right.
If you're not curious, I always ask my graduate students, "What's the most important thing you bring to this class?" And they'll go all kinds of kind of textbooks answers, and I'll go, "The most important thing you have is curiosity. If you're not curious, there's the door.
Oh
Just
man,
just go."
I can't tell you how much that brings a smile to my face for you to say that.
It's curiosity,
Yeah,
and I'm curious, whether it's playing a trumpet or sitting here reading this or whatever it is.
yeah. No,
Be
I
curious.
listen. You're preaching. You're not preaching to the choir. You're preaching to a preacher. Absolutely, 100%. When I'm not doing nothing, I'm on YouTube watching the History Channel and watching all these things. How did that happen? Why did that happen? Who did this? I get it. I really get on all subjects. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I'll probably edit all my superfluous crap out of this thing, but I wanted to say thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate it. We did get your top 5. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the things that you had to say. Thank you very much. So unless you got something else,
No, no. So I'll see you at the Red Light Cafe Wednesday nights, 9 to 12. And yeah, if you want to bring a horn or you want to sing, just make sure you're prepared.
yeah, that's it. So Bob Bakert with Dr. Gordon Vernick. Thank you so much, Gordon. Really
Absolutely,
appreciate it.
Bob. My pleasure. Take
Take
care.
care. Bye
Safe
bye.
travels.